The day my sister's wedding was supposed to be something magical, it almost turned into a nightmare. It's not like I ever wanted to be the center of attention, but that's what I became. The uninvited guest at my sister's celebration, even though I was standing right there. Let me backtrack for a second. My name is Olivia, and for some reason, I've always been the one in my family who's too much or not enough. Too intimidating, too independent, too blunt. I guess that's why when my sister, Sophie, announced her engagement to Andrew, I wasn't exactly jumping for joy. Andrew's family? Well, they weren't exactly my type. The groom's side was the picture of wealth. Clean-cut, polished, practically glowing in their designer clothes. And then there was me, a lawyer who spent more time with books than people. Let's just say I wasn't exactly on their wavelength. The first time I met Andrew's parents, they barely acknowledged me. The mother gave me one of those tight smiles that made it clear I wasn't welcome. His father? Let's just say he could barely hide the disdain in his eyes as he looked me over. As the days passed and the wedding drew closer, I started to feel more like a shadow in my own family. But it wasn't just Andrew's parents. No, it was his aunt, his uncle, hell, even his cousins. They made it a sport to point out my every flaw, every rough edge they said I had. I tried to smile through it, but it wasn't easy. I was already on edge because of my own insecurities. My job was barely hanging on. I had no boyfriend, and my family seemed to treat me like a failure. The worst moment came at the rehearsal dinner. I had tried to dress down, to fit in with all of them, but they could still see right through me. Olivia, honey, you should smile more. You don't want to look so intimidating, Andrew's Aunt Karen said to me with that fake sweetness of hers. I was ready to snap. I'm just here to support my sister, I said, my voice colder than I intended. That's when it all started. Laughter from across the room, Andrew's cousins whispering behind their hands. Too intimidating, one of them mocked. She'll scare off the groom if she's not careful. My sister Sophie just stood there caught in the middle. She wanted to play the peacekeeper, but her eyes never met mine. She was too busy trying to make everyone happy to notice how much I was falling apart. That night, I stayed in my hotel room alone, staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out how the hell I ended up here. A family event meant to celebrate love felt like a battleground, and for the first time in my life, I considered walking away completely. But then I remembered one thing. Revenge is a dish best served cold. The next morning, I could barely look at myself in the mirror. My reflection felt like a cruel joke. This woman who was supposed to be part of a family that had never really understood her. Sophie, my little sister, was the one who always seemed to have it all. She was the golden child, the one everyone fawned over. And now, with her wedding just around the corner, I was expected to play the dutiful older sister. I tried to shake off the feeling of dread that seemed to cling to me. After all, it wasn't about me. It was Sophie's big day. So I forced myself to smile as I picked out my dress for the ceremony. I'd even gone out of my way to get something elegant, not too flashy, so I wouldn't stand out. But nothing would be enough. When I arrived at the wedding venue, the mansion where the event was being held, I immediately felt that familiar knot in my stomach. The place was a goddamn palace. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, gold accents, the kind of wealth that made your skin crawl. And there I was, in my simple dress, feeling more and more like an outsider. Sophie was glowing. She had the kind of beauty that made everyone stop and stare. Her long blonde hair cascaded down her back in perfect waves, and her white dress sparkled under the chandeliers. It wasn't just her looks, though. It was the way she moved, graceful, confident. The opposite of me. As I watched her with Andrew, I could see the connection between them, but something felt off. It was like they were living in a bubble, surrounded by people who adored them. Meanwhile, I was stuck on the outside looking in. Olivia, honey, you're looking a little tense, Karen, Andrew's aunt, said as she passed by me. She wore a smile that was too sweet to be genuine. You should relax, dear. You're not a part of the spotlight, but that doesn't mean you can't enjoy yourself, right? I forced a smile, but my patience was wearing thin. The sarcastic undertones were obvious, and my temper was on the edge. I turned away and wandered through the grand hall, hoping to avoid further interaction. But no matter where I went, the constant feeling of being watched, of being judged, followed me. As I walked down a corridor, I bumped into someone unexpectedly. "Oh, I'm so sorry," I exclaimed, looking up. And then I froze. Standing before me was Andrew's uncle. He was tall, impeccably dressed in a sleek black suit, his salt and pepper hair adding to the air of authority that surrounded him. His eyes were sharp, observant, as if he saw through the polished exterior and straight into the soul of whoever he was looking at. "Olivia, right?" he said, his voice deep and steady. "I've heard a lot about you." I blinked, unsure of how to respond. Yes, that's me." He smiled slightly, a glint of amusement in his eyes. "Don't worry, you're not the only one feeling out of place." I raised an eyebrow, surprised. "I thought I was the only one who felt like an outsider here." "Not even close," he replied. "Trust me. This whole thing? It's a show for the masses, but if you look closely, it's all smoke and mirrors." I didn't know how to respond to that. His words seemed so loaded with meaning. Before I could say anything, he glanced at his watch. "I'll leave you to your thoughts, but if you need someone to talk to, I'm here." And with that, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. I stood there for a moment, stunned. What had just happened? Why did I feel like I'd just had a conversation with someone who truly understood me? I shook my head. This was not the time to dwell on it. Sophie was about to marry Andrew, and I needed to focus on that, not some random interaction with her uncle. But for some reason, his words stuck with me. Maybe he was right. Maybe I wasn't the only one who felt out of place here. The hours leading up to the wedding felt like a blur. The grand ballroom was filled with guests dressed in their finest, laughter and chatter floating through the air. Sophie was radiant, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being suffocated. I knew this day wasn't about me, yet the way Andrew's family looked at me, always so judgmental, so distant, was more than I could bear. I tried to stay busy, help with small things, act like everything was fine. But deep down, I could feel it. The gap between them and me was unbridgeable. As I stood near the entrance, fiddling with the strap of my heel, I noticed Andrew's aunt, Karen, gliding across the room toward me. Her eyes locked on mine, and I could already feel my blood pressure rising. "Olivia," she said, her voice dripping with sweetness. "Are you sure you're in the right place? It's just, this kind of event can be overwhelming for someone like you." I wanted to snap at her, tell her exactly what I thought of her condescending attitude. But I held it in. I always held it in. I wasn't going to let her get to me. But then she continued, her words hitting their mark. "It's just, well, I'm sure you've noticed how everyone is just so perfect here. It must be hard for you to keep up." The laughter from her group of friends behind her wasn't subtle. I felt the weight of their judgment as it descended on me like a ton of bricks. My sister Sophie was busy with the ceremony preparations and hadn't seen any of this. It seems like I was always the one left to deal with the ugliness. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "I'm here to support my sister. Nothing more, nothing less," I said through clenched teeth. Karen smiled, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Of course. But I'm sure Sophie would appreciate it if you didn't draw too much attention to yourself. I'm sure you wouldn't want to ruin the day for her." I had had enough. "Karen, if you think I'm here to ruin anything, you're sadly mistaken," I said, my voice low but firm. "I'm not like you. I'm not playing games." She blinked, taken aback by my tone. But before she could respond, I turned on my heel and walked away. My heart was pounding in my chest, my hands trembling. But as I made my way to the balcony for some air, I couldn't help but feel a tiny spark of satisfaction. I wasn't going to let her get away with this. I stepped outside. The cool air hit my skin, and I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to collect myself. That's when I felt the presence of someone behind me. It was him again, the groom's billionaire uncle. "I saw that," he said quietly, his deep voice cutting through the tension that still clung to me. "You've got more backbone than anyone in that room." I turned to face him, surprised by the way he was looking at me, like he saw something more than just a disgruntled family member. "I'm just tired of being looked down on," I said, my voice thick with emotion. He nodded, stepping closer. You don't have to apologize for who you are. Those people, they don't matter. But what does matter is how you handle this day. You don't need to let them see you break. I couldn't help but be taken aback by his words. The uncle was a mystery to me. He didn't seem to care about the wealth or status that everyone else was obsessed with. He had this quiet strength that made me feel like, for the first time, I wasn't alone in a room full of strangers. I'm not breaking, I said, my voice more confident than I felt. But I'm tired of pretending everything's fine when it's not. He gave a small, knowing smile. I get it. Sometimes, it takes a while to figure out who you really are in a place like this. I didn't know why, but his words stuck with me. For the first time in this endless parade of wealth and judgment, someone had seen me. Someone had acknowledged the struggle I'd been carrying, but before I could respond, a loud voice interrupted. Olivia, there you are! Sophie's voice echoed down the hallway as she appeared in the doorway. What are you doing out here? It's almost time! I looked between Sophie and her uncle, suddenly feeling like I was in the middle of something I didn't fully understand. The uncle's eyes met mine one last time, a silent promise of something unspoken. I'll see you inside, he said, his tone warm but enigmatic, and just like that, he was gone. Sophie rushed over, wrapping her arms around me. Are you okay? You look like you've been through a lot. I'm fine, I said, forcing a smile. Just needed some air. But as we walked inside, something inside me shifted. The day was about to take a turn, and whether I liked it or not, the story was far from over. The wedding was everything I had expected. Glamorous, over the top, and suffocating in its perfection. The moment I stepped into the grand ballroom, I was hit by the overpowering scent of expensive flowers and the hum of polite conversation. It felt like a world designed to make me feel small, insignificant. Sophie looked radiant in her wedding dress, and for a fleeting moment I tried to push aside my feelings of resentment and just focus on her. This was her day, after all. But no matter how hard I tried, the constant judgments from Andrew's family and their disapproving glances gnawed at me. They had treated me like an outsider, and the worst part was, Sophie seemed oblivious to it all. As the ceremony began, I took my seat, watching the people around me, their faces a blur of polished smiles and expensive attire. I had almost convinced myself that I was going to make it through this day without losing my composure when I felt the familiar, unsettling presence of Andrew's billionaire uncle at my side. I looked up, and there he was again, standing there as if he had been waiting for this moment. His gaze was calm, calculating, yet somehow comforting in a way I couldn't explain. You're a long way from the edge of the room, he said, his voice low and smooth, like he'd been following my every move. I blinked, surprised by the way he seemed to know exactly how I was feeling. Just trying to blend in, I muttered, feeling a little defensive. But that's not really working, is it? He raised an eyebrow, his lips curling into a half smile. You know, Olivia, you don't need to fit into this world. This world needs to fit into you. I glanced at him, trying to read his expression. I had no idea what he meant, but for some reason, his words resonated with me more than they should have. Maybe it was the quiet confidence in his voice, or maybe it was the fact that he wasn't like the rest of them. He didn't care about appearances, about money, or about keeping up the charade. You're different, he continued, his gaze intense. I can tell, and that's something they'll never understand. His words hit me harder than I expected. All this time I had tried to hide who I really was, thinking it would make everything easier. But now, for the first time, I felt like someone had actually seen me. Not the angry, defensive version of me, but the real me. The person who was tired of pretending. Thank you, I said quietly, unsure of how else to respond. It wasn't just gratitude. It was something deeper, something I couldn't put into words. He smiled again, this time more genuinely. You don't need to thank me. You've got more power in you than you realize. Don't let them take it from you. Before I could reply, the sound of the wedding march filled the room, signaling that it was time for Sophie to walk down the aisle. As I turned to watch, I felt a pang in my chest. She looked so beautiful, so happy, like everything was perfect. But something about the way Andrew's uncle had spoken to me lingered. It felt like a crack in the facade, a small opening to something bigger. I watched as Sophie and Andrew exchanged their vows, the room filled with applause. I clapped along with the rest, but my mind was somewhere else, focused on the man who had made me feel like I mattered in a room full of people who had only ever seen me as a problem. When the ceremony ended, I stepped outside to clear my head. The evening air was cool against my skin, and I took a deep breath, trying to shake the tension that had built up inside me. But before I could fully calm down, I heard footsteps behind me. "Olivia, wait up." I turned to find Andrew's uncle standing at the edge of the balcony, looking as calm as ever. He wasn't like the others. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He didn't need to. "Can we talk for a minute?" he asked, his voice calm, almost reassuring. I nodded, unsure of where this was heading. "Sure." He walked up to the railing next to me, staring out at the vast grounds of the estate. "This wedding, it's more than just a celebration of love," he said slowly, his voice thoughtful. "It's a performance. And I know you see it too." I wasn't sure how to respond, but I felt a strange connection to his words. He was right. The whole thing felt like a show, a carefully orchestrated display of wealth and status, and I wasn't sure I wanted to be part of it anymore. "I'm not sure I belong here," I admitted, my voice quieter than I intended. "You belong exactly where you are," he replied, his tone firm, but not unkind. "But sometimes it takes someone else to show you that." "I've been where you are, Olivia. I've been in this world, surrounded by people who only care about appearances and power. And let me tell you something. It's all empty. All of it." I turned to look at him, surprised by the vulnerability in his voice. He didn't seem like the type to open up to anyone, yet here he was, sharing something real with me. "You're not like them," he added, his eyes meeting mine. "And that's your strength. Don't forget that." I didn't know how to respond, but in that moment I realized something important. Maybe, just maybe, I didn't have to play their game. Maybe it was time to stop pretending, to stop trying to fit into a world that wasn't mine. As we stood there in silence, the weight of his words hung between us. I felt a shift within myself, something I couldn't quite explain. Maybe it was the realization that I didn't need to conform to anyone else's expectations. Maybe it was the quiet acknowledgement that, for once, I had someone who saw me for who I truly was. And as I turned to head back inside, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. Something was changing, and I wasn't sure where it would lead. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was in control of my own story. The reception that followed Sophie's wedding was everything I had anticipated, extravagant and full of smiles that didn't quite reach the eyes. The champagne flowed, the laughter rang out, and I was still on the edge of it all. I sat at a table by myself, picking at my food as I watched the interactions unfold around me. Sophie was too busy basking in her new life with Andrew, surrounded by their elite friends and family, to notice the growing divide between us. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted after my conversation with Andrew's uncle. The words he had spoken to me, those quiet, powerful words about strength, about being different, were stuck in my mind, rattling around like a puzzle I hadn't yet solved. It was as if he had handed me the key to something bigger, something that I had been missing all along. I hadn't expected him to approach me again, but then there he was, standing by my table, looking every bit the composed, enigmatic figure that he was. "Olivia," he said, his deep voice smooth as always. "Mind if I join you?" I glanced up, surprised. Sure, of course." I gestured to the empty seat across from me, feeling a little awkward, but also oddly comforted by his presence. He sat down without hesitation, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to the whirlwind of activity around us. He looked as if he was unaffected by the noise, by the fake smiles, by the spectacle of it all. And that in itself was oddly comforting. "You seem out of place here," he said, eyeing the crowd as though they were all part of a theatrical performance. "But I can tell you don't need to be. This isn't your world, Olivia. Not yet. But it could be." I raised an eyebrow. What do you mean by that? His gaze was steady, but there was a hint of something more in his eyes, something calculating, something that seemed to suggest he knew more about me than I was comfortable with. I'm offering you something, he continued, leaning in slightly, his voice dropping to a near whisper. A chance to change things, to step into a world where you're not just a spectator but a player. I know you've been struggling. Career, relationships, trying to fit in. I've seen it. I understand it. And I'm offering you an opportunity. Something that could change your life. I sat there staring at him, unsure of how to process what he was saying. Was this some kind of joke? Was he really offering me a chance to change everything? What do you mean exactly? I asked cautiously. He smiled, a slow, knowing smile that sent a shiver down my spine. I run a private investment firm. We deal with high-profile clients, opportunities that most people would never even dream of. And I want you to be part of it. Not as a consultant, not as an intern, but as a partner. You're smart, Olivia. You've got drive, something a lot of people here don't have. And I'm willing to bet that you've got the instincts to succeed, in a way that would make even the most seasoned professionals jealous. I blinked, trying to process his words. Wait. You want me to work with you? In your firm? My voice was barely a whisper, the weight of what he was suggesting beginning to sink in. He nodded unfazed. I know it's a big leap, but think about it. You've been overlooked and underestimated your entire life, right? What if I could give you the tools to flip the script on all of that? What if I could show you how to leverage everything you already have? The intelligence, the ambition, the willingness to fight back and use it to your advantage? I could feel my heart racing. This was not what I had expected. I had come here to attend my sister's wedding, to try to navigate the uncomfortable world of her fiancé's family. But now I was being offered something I never thought I could have. A real chance at something more than just surviving. What's the catch? I asked, suddenly suspicious. It was too easy, too perfect. There had to be something I wasn't seeing. He chuckled softly, as if he had anticipated the question. The catch is simple. You'll have to leave behind the comfortable world you know. You'll have to stop worrying about what everyone else thinks. It won't be easy. There'll be sacrifices, moments when you'll question everything. But if you're willing to take the risk, I'll make sure you have the opportunity to succeed. I stared at him, torn between excitement and doubt. My mind was spinning. It felt like the perfect solution to everything. My career struggles, my loneliness, my constant sense of not measuring up. But could I really take that step? Could I leave behind the life I knew for something unknown? Something this dangerous? You don't have to decide right now, he said, reading my hesitation. But I'm offering you the chance of a lifetime. All you have to do is take it. I didn't know what to say. The thought of stepping into this new world, of actually having control over my future, was both exhilarating and terrifying. It was a world I had always felt excluded from, and now, here I was, being offered a place at the table. But at what cost? Was I ready to make that leap? I'll think about it, I said, my voice steady, though my heart was racing. I didn't know if I was ready, but I had to admit. This was the first time in a long time that I felt like I had a real opportunity to change my life. And I wasn't going to let it slip away without at least considering it. Andrew's uncle gave me a sharp look, as if he already knew the wheels were turning in my mind. Take your time, but don't wait too long. Opportunities like this don't come around often. As he stood to leave, I watched him walk away, feeling a mix of excitement, fear, and uncertainty. I didn't know what the future held, but I did know one thing. I was no longer just a spectator in my own life. I had a choice, and that for once felt like everything. The days that followed Sophie's wedding felt like a blur. I could barely concentrate at work, and every time I closed my eyes, I saw Andrew's uncle, the offer he made, his steady gaze, the possibilities hanging in the air like a breath I hadn't yet exhaled. It was as if everything in my life was teetering on the edge, waiting for me to make a decision that would change everything. But instead of making that decision, I did what I always did. I buried myself in the familiar routine. I worked late hours, stayed busy with cases that barely mattered, and kept my distance from everything that threatened to disrupt my carefully crafted world. But the truth was, I couldn't escape the pull of what Andrew's uncle had offered. Every night, as I sat in my apartment, the world around me seemed smaller and smaller. I was drowning in the same stale thoughts. My career was stagnant, my family wasn't getting any less toxic, and my loneliness was growing. I could feel it, deep in my gut. Everything was falling apart. And no matter how much I tried to ignore it, there was this nagging feeling that maybe, just maybe, this was my chance to change it all. Then came the phone call. I had just finished a grueling meeting at work when my phone buzzed. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered anyway. Olivia? The voice on the other end was calm, collected, and all too familiar. Yes? I asked, my heart racing as I realized who it was. It's Andrew's uncle, he said, his tone smooth as always. I was wondering if you had a chance to think about what I offered. I have, I replied, trying to sound as confident as I could. But truthfully, my mind was still clouded, still unsure of what to do. And I'm not sure I'm ready. It's a lot to take in. I understand. But I need to tell you something, he said, his voice suddenly more serious. There's something you need to know about your sister's marriage. I froze. What do you mean? The family isn't what it seems, he continued, his words laced with something darker. Andrew's family, your sister's in-laws, are hiding a lot more than they're letting on. They've been using Sophie and her wedding as a way to push forward some business deals. Sophie's role in this whole thing? It's a lot more complicated than she knows. My breath caught in my throat. I had always suspected that there was something off about Andrew's family. But this was something entirely different. What are you saying? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. I'm saying that your sister is being manipulated, he said bluntly. She's not just marrying Andrew for love. She's marrying into a business deal that's been planned for years. And I have the documents to prove it. The silence between us was deafening. I didn't know how to respond. This was the last thing I had expected to hear. Why are you telling me this? I managed to say. What do you want from me? He exhaled slowly. I'm telling you because you need to know what's at stake here. Your sister is walking into something much darker than she realizes, and you're the only one who can do something about it. I've been watching you, Olivia. I see the strength in you. You're not like the rest of them. You can do what needs to be done. I was speechless. My mind was racing, 100 questions flying through my head. Why was he telling me this? What did he expect me to do with this information? And why me? Are you asking me to go after Andrew's family? I asked, my voice trembling. I'm not asking you to do anything illegal, he replied, but I'm offering you a chance to right the wrongs that have been done to you, and to your sister. There are people in your family who've been using you, Olivia, people who've been hiding the truth. If you want to take control of your life, take control of the situation, this is your chance. It's all in your hands now. His words hung in the air, thick with implication. I wanted to say no. I wanted to dismiss him, pretend this was some twisted game. But something in me, something deep, something primal, began to wake up. For the first time, I wasn't just a bystander in my life. I could feel the power shifting, feel the control slipping into my hands. Okay, I said, my voice steady despite the chaos in my mind. I'll listen. I'll hear what you have to say. You won't regret this, he said, a faint trace of satisfaction in his tone. I'll send you everything you need, and once you have the truth, you'll know what to do with it. I ended the call, the weight of the conversation settling on my shoulders. It was as if the ground beneath me had shifted, the world suddenly tilting in a direction I wasn't sure I was ready to face. But one thing was clear. I couldn't go back. Once I opened this door, there was no turning back. Sophie deserved to know the truth. But so did I. That night, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, my mind racing with all the things I had just learned. I kept thinking about Sophie, my sister, the one person who had always been there for me. But how could I tell her the truth about her marriage without shattering everything she held dear? Was I willing to risk that for her, for the truth? I didn't know yet. But as the hours ticked by, the answer became clearer. I couldn't stay in the dark any longer. I had to confront the lies, not just for Sophie's sake, but for my own. It was time to face the truth, no matter what it cost. The next few days felt like a blur, a fog of confusion and adrenaline. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was standing at the edge of something I wasn't prepared for. I had been handed the truth, dark, ugly, and threatening, but now I had to decide what to do with it. Andrew's uncle had sent me the documents he promised. I had gone through them in a feverish haze, my hands trembling as I read. Everything was there. Emails, contracts, meetings arranged under the guise of social gatherings, all pointing to a single truth. Sophie wasn't marrying Andrew for love. She was marrying him to solidify a business deal that would benefit her. New in-laws and their wealth. It was worse than I'd imagined. Much worse. I had always known Andrew's family wasn't as perfect as they seemed, but this was beyond anything I could have prepared for. Sophie had been sold a lie, and the more I thought about it, the angrier I became, not just at them but at myself. How had I let this happen? How had I let my own family get so entangled in these people's web of deceit? There was only one thing left to do now: expose the truth. But the question was how. I sat in my apartment that evening, surrounded by the documents Andrew's uncle had sent me, my mind racing. There were so many layers to this, so many ways I could approach it. But in the end, I knew one thing. The truth wasn't enough. I needed to hurt them the way they'd hurt Sophie. And if that meant bringing the full weight of their lies into the light, then so be it. The phone call from Andrew's uncle came just as I was about to close the folder of documents. His voice was steady, as always, but there was a new sense of urgency in it now. "Olivia," he said, his tone low. "Have you looked through everything I sent?" "I've seen enough," I replied, my voice cold. "It's worse than I thought. Sophie doesn't deserve this." He paused for a moment, and when he spoke again, his voice was softer. "No one does. But you have an opportunity here, Olivia. You've been underestimated your whole life. You've been invisible to them. But now you can make them see you." I didn't need to ask what he meant. The strategy was clear. I had everything I needed to expose the truth, and now it was time to play the game. "The wedding isn't over, is it?" I asked, my heart pounding. "No," he replied. "It's just the beginning of something much bigger. You've got the chance to rewrite the script. Do you want it?" I hesitated, letting the gravity of his words sink in. This was the moment of choice. Once I took that step, there was no turning back. I could expose everything, shatter Sophie's world, but I could also tear apart the family I had always tried to protect. Was I willing to do that? I didn't know the answer yet, but I did know this. I was tired of standing by. I was tired of being the one who got hurt. It was time to take control. "I'm ready," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "Let's do it." The following days were a whirlwind of planning and preparation. Andrew's uncle provided me with more details, more cracks in the perfect facade of his family. The documents were crucial, but the strategy was even more important. I had to be careful. Timing was everything. I knew my first move was to confront Sophie. I couldn't let her walk into this marriage any further without giving her a chance to see what was really happening. She deserved the truth. She deserved to make her own decision about the life she was about to step into. But I had no idea how she would react. Would she believe me? Or would she shut me out, just like she had in the past? The day came when I decided to speak to her. I invited her to lunch at a quiet cafe, hoping for some privacy. When she arrived, I could see the same glowing smile on her face that had been there at the wedding, oblivious, carefree. She hadn't yet realized that everything around her was about to crumble. "Olivia, what's going on?" she asked, taking a seat across. From me, her eyes bright with excitement. "You've seemed so distant lately. Is everything okay?" I didn't know how to start. How do you break someone's world apart? How do you tell them that everything they thought they knew was a lie? Taking a deep breath, I slid the documents across the table toward her. Sophie, I said, my voice trembling slightly. This is what's really going on. This is what I've found. The truth about Andrew's family. You deserve to know. Her eyes flickered between the documents and me, confusion growing on her face. What is this? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I know this is going to be hard to hear, but everything, your wedding, your marriage, has been orchestrated. You were never just marrying Andrew for love. His family has used you, Sophie. You're a part of a business deal. This isn't what you think it is. For a moment, she didn't say anything. She just stared at me, her eyes wide with disbelief. You're lying, she whispered, shaking her head. You have to be. I wish I was, I replied softly. But everything's here. The emails, the contracts, the meetings. They've been using you, Sophie, and I can prove it. She didn't touch the documents. Instead, she pushed them. Back toward me, her hands trembling. No, I can't believe this. This isn't true. I know it's hard, I said, my heart aching. But you need to see the truth. You need to make your own choice. This thing they've made you a part of can't be ignored anymore. I could see the tears forming in her eyes, and for a brief moment, I wondered if I had gone too far. But then she looked at me, really looked at me, as though for the first time in years, she was seeing me for who I really was. And in that moment, I knew that this was the turning point. The question was no longer whether I would expose their lies. It was whether Sophie could handle the truth. The silence between Sophie and I was deafening. She sat across from me, still staring at the documents I had laid before her, the weight of everything I had just told her sinking in. Her hands were trembling, her face pale, and I could see the emotional storm brewing behind her eyes. She wanted to deny it. She wanted to pretend this wasn't real. But deep down, I knew she had already seen the cracks. She had to have. Sophie, I said softly, my voice cracking, I never wanted to hurt you. I didn't want to be the one to tell you all of this, but you deserve the truth. You deserve to know what you're really walking into. Her lips parted as if she wanted to speak, but the words never came. She just stared at me, her eyes wide with disbelief, confusion, and anger. I don't know what to believe anymore, she whispered, finally finding her voice. I can't even process it, all of it, everything. I know, I said, my heart aching for her. It's a lot. But this isn't just about what's happening to you. This is about who you are and what you deserve. You deserve a choice, Sophie. A real choice. Tears welled in her eyes as she looked down at the documents, then back at me. I don't know what to do with this. I don't know if I can even confront them. I don't know if I can go through with the wedding, knowing that everything I thought was real is just a lie. I leaned forward, my hand gently touching hers. You don't have to do it alone. You have me, no matter what. And I promise, I'll help you figure this out. You're stronger than you think. Sophie shook her head, her voice barely above a whisper. But I'm in so deep, Liv. I've already committed to them. I've already promised to be a part of their world. How can I walk away from that? The weight of her words hit me like a tidal wave. I had spent so much time focused on exposing their lies, on dismantling their perfect world, that I hadn't truly considered how this would affect her. She was caught between the truth I had just revealed and the life she had spent years building. I could see the pain in her eyes, the battle between her loyalty to her family and the realization that everything she had known was a lie. I took a deep breath and squeezed her hand. I'm not asking you to walk away from everything, Sophie. I'm asking you to take control of your own life. You deserve to decide who you are, who you want to be. You deserve more than being a pawn in someone else's game. For a long time, she didn't say anything. She just sat there, her eyes downcast, her hands folded tightly in her lap. And then finally she looked at me. Really looked at me. And for the first time in years, I saw the sister I had once known, the one who had always been strong, confident, and unapologetically herself. "You're right," she said, her voice stronger now, though still tinged with fear. "I can't keep living this way. I can't keep pretending that everything's fine when it's not. I've been lying to myself, thinking that if I just went along with their plans, everything would fall into place. But it's not going to, is it?" "No," I said softly. "It won't. Not if you keep ignoring the truth." She wiped her eyes, taking a deep breath. "Okay," she said, her voice shakier than before. "Okay, I'll face it. I'll talk. To Andrew. I'll talk to them." I nodded, relief flooding through me. "I'll be here, every step of the way. Whatever you need." Sophie stood up, her movements slow but determined. "I have to do this. I can't let them control me anymore." As she walked toward the door, I knew this was the beginning of something new for both of us. The path ahead would be difficult, but it was the only way forward. We both had to confront the people who had controlled our lives for too long, and it was time to take back the power we had allowed them to steal. Hours later, Sophie called me. I didn't know what to expect. I was sitting at home, racked with nerves, waiting for the fallout. Would she have gone through with it? Would she have confronted Andrew's family? I held my breath as I answered the phone. "Liv," Sophie said, her voice low but steady. "I did it. I talked to them." My heart raced. "What happened?" "I told Andrew. I told him everything. And you know what? He didn't deny it. He didn't try to make excuses. He just sat there, looking at me like I was the one who was crazy." I bit my lip, holding my breath. "And what did you say?" "I told him that I was done, that I wouldn't be a part of whatever scheme they had planned. I told him I wanted out. I didn't know whether to feel proud or terrified." "And what did he do?" "He didn't try to stop me," she said quietly. "He just let me go. And I think I finally see him for who he really is." "Are you okay?" I asked, my heart aching for her. "Yeah," she replied, a faint smile in her voice. "I think I am. I'm going to be okay, Liv. I'm free." That night, as I lay in bed, the weight of everything that had happened settled over me. The truth had been exposed. The lies had been uncovered. And Sophie had finally taken control of her own story. It wasn't easy. There would be fallout. There always is when the truth comes to light. But I knew one thing for sure. Sophie and I had both learned that our lives didn't belong to anyone else. They were ours, and no one would ever take that away from us again. As I closed my eyes, I finally felt at peace. The revenge was complete. But the real victory wasn't in the downfall of Andrew's family. It was in our strength to walk away, to choose a future that was truly ours. And as I drifted off to sleep, I knew one thing. This was only the beginning.